Coming up, you may know him from There. Now an award-winning author is out with his second novel. Plus, black lung disease on the Navajo Nation points out inequalities in healthcare. And we go to the island that is growing in popularity as a tourism destination in Alaska. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amidawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start our newscast in Miami, where we find Interior Secretary Deb Haaland talking up Indigenous climate change solutions.
Hello, Aspen Ideas Climate.
Haaland spoke Tuesday at a conference of global thought leaders addressing the climate crisis. She highlighted public land co-stewardship policies, where tribes take on increasing management roles as a way to center Indigenous knowledge in the fight to save a human-friendly climate.
Successful co-stewardship ensures Indigenous knowledge, a deep understanding of the land and wildlife incurred over millennia, is a most essential strategy to tackle the climate crisis.
Officials in the United States, Canada, and Indigenous groups are addressing mining pollution. For over a decade, advocates have pushed against the effects of coal mining in the waterways bordering British Columbia and the U.S. The plan? To utilize century-old treaty rights, letting tribes form independent boards to assess the pollution's extent and suggest cleanup methods. Scientists from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency note high selenium levels that have damaged local fisheries and other wildlife in the area. Tribal communities rely on these fish for survival. The proposal calls for a maximum 2-year study period before reducing pollution impacts as quick as possible. In Arizona, a new outpatient clinic helps tackle substance abuse among Native Americans. The Native American Fathers and Families Association provides Native-led programs and support for bringing men back to strengthen their families. NAFFA Wellness opened its first location in Mesa last week and approaches mental health struggles and substance abuse curriculum with a culture-based model. According to NAFFA Director of Training and Navajo citizen Cheryl Honey, having Native ways of life in mind while creating treatment programs, therapeutic models, and counseling helps meet the needs of what Natives are and need. Easy-to-access contraceptives are becoming a new reality for women and teens nationwide. The Food and Drug Administration approved a new progesterone-only birth control pill that will be available over the counter. The launch is a first ever in the U.S. and comes amidst prolonged political and legal struggles concerning reproductive health. The O pill will be sold in major stores and pharmacies and supermarkets, as well as online. There will be no age restriction, appointment, or prescription needed. A 1-month supply will cost about $20 and a 3-month supply will cost around $50. They will be available by the end of the month. Well, a new report reveals Indigenous fire management started at least 11,000 years ago. James Cook University researchers analyzed sediments in Australia that showed fire patterns, revealing Aboriginal burning practices used to maintain landscapes. Cultural burning is integral to Aboriginal Australian traditions, but burning practices stopped after European arrival. According to lead scientists on the study, the findings suggest that reestablishing Indigenous fire regimens could reduce the risk of catastrophic bushfires and improve environmental land management. Author Tommy Orange won a National Book Award for his debut novel, There. He's back with a new book, Wandering Stars. It's a sweeping tale that chronicles one family from Sand Creek through boarding schools to Alcatraz and into today. Stuart Huntington caught up with this remarkable artist.
Tommy Orange, welcome to our show. I've heard it said that truth and reconciliation starts with truth. Seems like you're going for some deep truths.
Yeah. I mean, I think we live in a world with a lot of noise, information. It's overwhelming, and truth, sometimes even the word has been sort of cheapened, or people can be skeptical about it, and there's all this political divide. But I think art kind of tricks you into thinking about truth without saying that it's doing that, and that's part of why I like art of all different kinds. So I really like the role of art in a time when fact and truth and, you know, as AI starts to become this creepy uncanny valley thing, even reality is you know, it's going to get weird.
You write a lot about boarding schools in your new book. They weren't really schools, were they?
Yeah, I mean, schools is a way of sterilizing what it was, and boarding schools do exist, and usually they're like for rich people, and you know, the forced education, it was not just like an empty slate, and they were giving them, you know, they were actively telling them that they couldn't practice their cultural life ways and their languages. So it's definitely something besides school when you're forced in, when there's a reprogramming or there's punishment for being who you actually are. I think not talking about them as schools makes sense. I think as Native people, we know when somebody says boarding schools, it means something completely different than like sending your kid off to, you know, the East Coast and having them live in a fancy dorm and in order to get into a good college. We know what we mean when we say boarding schools, but I get the sentiment that them being schools is absurd.
Addiction and recovery are prominent in both of your books. Northern Cheyenne traditional chief Philip Whiteman Jr. calls addiction a symptom of oppression. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we've been painted, especially with alcohol, is like Native people have a weakness for it, and not looking at the symptoms for why people are going to these things is convenient. It's convenient to blame the symptom as a moral failing, because that means you don't have to look at the reason why people might be suffering. And I think it's important not to look away from the reasons why some of these things exist. Addiction's such a widespread and tricky thing, and different people get addicted for different reasons. But I think Native people and the level of addiction, you have to look at what we're suffering from and what happened. And like you were saying before, the beginning of truth and reconciliation, the truth piece is really important. Attention on what actually happened and educating the country on what actually happened will bring about healing just by doing that. There's lots of other stuff to do, but getting the truth out to people is really important.
You write about endurance tests. You say they're good for buildings, but not so much for people. It's like resilience can be a superpower and a burden.
Resilience gets sort of put on Native people to make them feel like you're still strong, but you're not ever looking at, well, what are they being resilient from? Like, what if they got knocked down and they're getting up, or continually knocked down? What is knocking them down? We don't want to look at that. And so I remember getting fatigued of the language of resilience just working in the nonprofit world, because it felt like, you know, overemphasizing this strength, which is great. Resilience is great. But there was an overemphasis on the strength to get up without ever looking at why people are being knocked down.
And finally, what's your advice for a kid who wants to be a writer?
I think sometimes there's a more clear path to doing something like basketball. Like you can go out and shoot 1,000 free throws in a week, and your free throw is going to get better. And with music, like you practice your instrument over time, you know that it requires practice to get better. These are disciplines. A lot of times writing gets put in this category. Like not only do we teach it horribly in schools, the essay and the overemphasis on formula for the essay and the de-emphasis on voice and the natural ability that we all have to tell stories and speak from our own place. I think it also gets put in this dichotomy of either inspired or you have writer's block. People are always asking about writer's block. Or you have a story to tell or you don't. And it's if you could think of it like a discipline and find ways to keep working, figure out what the 1,000 free throws are in a week in writing. You can, if you love somebody's book, you can write out their sentences as practice. You can experiment with, there's lots of writing exercises available online, more than there's ever been before. So you can use writing exercises to practice. And so I was an athlete and a musician before I was a writer. So I understood this discipline piece. And when I went at writing in 2005 and practiced for the next, 9 years before I got into the MFA, I was doing that all on my own and just practicing as much as I could, reading as much as I could. Reading's a really important part of becoming a writer.
The Navajo Nation is seeing a surge in black lung disease among former coal miners. Now, a new study points to inequality in health outcomes for Indigenous people. In a partnership with KSJD News in Cortez, Colorado, Rocky Mountain PBS is reporting on the respiratory disease related to coal mining in the Four Corners region.
So we are in the Navajo Nation in Arizona, and we're about to pass alongside of Black Mesa. On top of Black Mesa is the Kayenta and Black Mesa mines. There's a variety of different lung diseases that are consistently found in the Four Corners region, where there are also a lot of coal and uranium mines.
We've had a boom in the miners' positive cases for black lung. A lot of the miners that have the black lung now or show signs of the black lung or are on oxygen, I would visit them at their home and ask them, what did you do to protect yourself? Shirts. We put it over our mouth, and that was our respirator. They had respirators. There was no enforcement until probably 1980 when I started mining. My name is Alexander Ossoff. I'm the Canyonlands Healthcare Black Lung Case Manager for our facility here on the Navajo Reservation, where miners can come and get screened for black lung. I've been getting, Colorado miners actually too. This being the base place where the preliminary screening is done. I was a driller. I was a core driller. Core driller is I go out to the coal field and get samples from the ground. 36 years at the mine. I was in dust probably 75% of the time.
The dust you can get from coal mining and surface coal mining is often silica dust. And silica dust, in a recent scientific study or research, it's been found that it causes black lung, even short exposures to silica dust.
Miners were starting to come to me, and their wives and the families were asking assistance on filling out Department of Labor applications for black lung. I had one miner tell me, you take care of my wife, my kids. I'm trusting you to make sure that they continue to get the benefits that I was getting when I was still alive. He passed 2 weeks later.
I think the education is really needed in the area on the Navajo Nation. They don't really realize what black lung is, especially with the term of pneumoconiosis. They don't know what that is. So what I do is I try to translate that into Navajo and to fully explain to them the severity of what black lung is. Our office covers all of Arizona. We are planning on expanding to Colorado and Utah. Miners can get pulmonary fibrosis, fibrosis of the lung, silicosis, and pneumoconiosis. So both coal and uranium miners can get pneumoconiosis. If people are working near coal mines, they call it black lung.
There's a black mountain back here. And you actually can see the coal seams in the edge of the mountain here. A coal mine nearby locally was Peabody Coal Western. 2 mines, Black Mesa and Kayenta Mine. Black Mesa stopping in 2005, where I first started working, and then transferred over into Kayenta Mine till recently, 2019, where it closed. The question was asked, do you think there was failure in the safety of the mine? Yes. Not only on behalf of the company, but on behalf of the miner himself.
Many of the miners are stubborn. They don't want to know about it. And it's a taboo for them to even talk about it. They say that if you talk about it, you'll get it. But I tell them, just get screened. Everyone needs to know about this. Everybody needs to know about the severity and this disease that is irreversible. And a lot of them at an older age, they finally realize that they're slower, they can't breathe, they get dizzy, they have all the symptoms of black lung, and they don't even think that there's nothing wrong.
Nitsika tai gitsi. Nitsika tai gitsi means I feel the good in what you've done. Nitsika tai gitsi. Nitsika tai gitsi. I feel the good in what you've done.
It's a destination tourism spot on an island. The Aluktik Museum and Archaeological Repository in Kodiak, Alaska wants you to stop by. It recently received a grant from the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association, or IENTA, in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service. April Counselor told ICT producer Shirley Snavy about the project.
This project is going to help us design a new exhibit in our gallery, as well as a couple of other things, including a statewide ad campaign for our museum and also a competition for artists for an outdoor mural. Our current building looks a little bit like an office building. It doesn't have a strong cultural presence, and so I'm excited to bring the incredible culture that we have inside our walls to an outside wall so that people out on the street can see our building and know, oh, that's the Aluktik Museum. I want to go visit.
Tell us a little bit more about the museum.
The Aluktik Museum opened in 1995, and so we're in our 29th year. We're hoping to reopen to the public in our 30th year for our grand reopening because we're currently under renovation. So this IENTA project is actually part of the new exhibits that we are creating as part of that renovation to expand the public spaces in our building and better serve the community through more exhibits, but also workshop spaces and just more to offer to the community.
Talk a little bit about tourism in Kodiak.
Well, Kodiak is a little bit off the beaten path here in Alaska. We're not in the southeast region when people often think of cruise ships and that sort of thing. We do actually get cruise ships here, a lot fewer than you might see in like Juneau or Ketchikan, but the number is increasing. And I think that nowadays there's more and more adventure tourists, people who do tourism to see the natural environment. And of course, we have a beautiful natural environment here. And then also cultural tourism is increasing. And so before the pandemic, we had slow increases to the number of visitors we had each year. And now that the pandemic is quieting down, we're seeing increased numbers of cruise ships, as well as increased numbers of independent travelers. And so we're hoping to capture the attention of some of these people who may not have wanted to come to Alaska in the past, but are now seeing it as a great place to visit. So we're hoping that this tourism grant will help get the word out about what we have to offer. And for those people who are already coming to Kodiak, we want our museum to be one of those not to miss places, because we really have, in my opinion, the best understanding and the best way of educating about our Native people.
Alaska's pretty big, and there's a lot of different kinds of tribes and different languages spoken. What stands out for you, or what would you want the visitor to know about the Alutiiq?
The Alutiiq people on Kodiak Island and also on the coast of Alaska are linguistically related to the Central Yupik language, and so that's one of our cousins. We're a little bit more distantly related to the Unangan people, which some people call Aleut. Actually, some people also used to call us Aleut. So there's a lot of confusion about the name for our Native people. And currently, Alutiiq and the word Sugpiaq are the two primary names that our people go by. I personally use Alutiiq, and my dad uses Sugpiaq. So there's no rhyme or reason. It's really based on preference. And so we try to make sure that everyone honors what each other is using as a name for our people. But we don't have a lot of people. On Kodiak Island, there's less than 4,000 Alutiiq people, and our communities are spread across an area the size of Connecticut, but we're all on an island that no one's connected by roads. And so it's a much different lifestyle than many people may be familiar with. But it's incredibly beautiful here, and our culture is really formed by the environment that we find ourselves in here in the stormy Gulf of Alaska.
I also was taking a look at your website. Archives seem to be personally very important to you.
Yes, archives are definitely important, and it's something that we try to connect people with here at the museum. You know, we're called the Alutiiq Museum and Archaeological Repository, sometimes just the Alutiiq Museum, but some people think of a museum as only having one thing to offer, and that is exhibits. Well, we do have exhibits at our museum, but we have so many more additional programs to help support the culture in the community, you know, living culture workshops. We just recently started doing some workshops to teach the regalia, the snow falling parka pattern, but in a modern style out of velvet. We've been doing workshops on the beaded regalia, the headdresses and the beaded cuffs and that sort of thing. And we've also done a lot of workshops on mask carving and basket weaving, just all of those cultural skills that over time became more difficult to pass down in the Native community. We're trying to help reconnect with those and bring them back into a living context.
Are you seeing a lot of interest in young people in learning about their culture?
Yes, we're seeing quite a lot of young people getting involved in either becoming an intern here at the Alutiiq Museum or participating in our workshops. And it's really exciting to see, because in my youth, I didn't even really understand what being Native meant because I grew up in the village. There wasn't really anyone to compare to. But after we moved into the town of Kodiak, you know, I realized, oh, you know, there's something different. I'm different than other people in my class. And at that time, you know, sometimes people would make fun of the Native students for various reasons. I'm seeing today that students are more proud of their Native heritage. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be really celebratory about. Learning our language, you know, kids are taking Alutiiq language classes now. Sometimes they're learning on their own. Sometimes they're doing it in school. We have culture camps in the summer. So our culture is really currently in a state of revitalization, and it's an exciting time to be involved. And it's an exciting time to also learn about our people, because our culture is really open in terms of wanting to share about our culture with other people in the community who are not tribal members or visitors that come from far away. And so I think that's one of the reasons that our museum feels welcoming, and we're hoping to attract more people in, rather than being just inward looking and only kind of focusing on ourselves. We try to walk in both worlds in that respect.
Again, that was April Counselor from the Aluktik Museum in Kodiak, Alaska. Did you happen to notice the building outside of April's window? Well, our producer Shirley Snavy did, and she was curious about its history. Check out the conversation she and April had about the building's connection to the community at ictnews.org. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit us online. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.